edition of Waiting for Next Year's CavsCast, part of the Evergreen Podcast Network. This is your host, Seth. And joining again tonight, you can read his work on Write Down Euclid. Listen to him daily at Locked On Cavs, which I just did about an hour ago at the gym. You guys got me through my little treadmill. Follow him at Am Not Evan. It's Evan Dammarell joining again. Evan, how are you, man?
I'm good, man. I hopefully our voices aren't too monotone enough where you don't fall asleep like on the treadmill or whatever you're doing. Like if someone's spotting you and you're benching, like the last thing I'd want is for you just like to fall asleep with the press and just crush yourself. So just safety first, obviously, when it comes to the gym. But yeah, I appreciate you listening, but I'm good, man. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing good. I feel like that was like some legal counsel to make sure you guys don't get sued or anything. So that's well taken. Good to stay on the airwaves
No,
for sure.
it's okay. I don't gatekeep podcast listening or podcast hosting or anything like that. If you know, you know. So
If you know, you know. Love it. Speaking of if you know, you know, I've got to do a quick ad read if you know about Underdog Fantasy. So we over at WFNY, we've got a great deal with Underdog Fantasy. For first-time depositors, we're going to match you $100 if you put in 100. Enter in the code WFNY at checkout, and Underdog will match your deposit up to $100. Underdog is a great platform if you're tired of the DFS salary system. There's tons of games, drafts every single night, any sport you can think of. Don't forget, use WFNY at checkout for your first time to get deposit matched up to $100. That being said, Evan, we haven't talked in a couple days. Cavs have gone 2-1. Opening night lost to the Raptors 105-108. Cavs got outscored by, I believe, 11 in the fourth. They rebounded to beat the Bulls 128-96 in what was one of the more ridiculous shooting nights I've ever seen by the Cleveland Cavaliers. They shot 56% from the game, 59% from three, and I believe they were up towards 90% from the free throw line. And then on the second half of the back-to-back, they went ahead and beat the Wizards 117-107, an overtime thriller. Like I said, second night of the back-to-back. The boys were tired, but they got it done. Evan, for those three games, 2-1 thus far, first weekend, can you give me one takeaway on offense and one on defense over those three games?
On offense, Donovan Mitchell's just out of his gourd insane right now. And he's averaging, I believe, 33 points, 6 assists, and 7 rebounds since Darius Garland went down when Gary Trent Jr. inadvertently poked his eye. And for folks listening, that it was a reckless play. Let's just be frank about it. But Donovan Mitchell's just been absolutely nuts. And I think him just kind of doing this it's a bit of a trial by fire. Like you're forcing Evan Mobley to get familiar with him for sure, but you're forcing this whole team to get familiar with Donovan Mitchell on the floor. But more than anything, it's just he's awesome. Like he is exactly as advertised. And I wrote about this for my story on Monday for Write Down Euclid, where last season when Darius Garland went down with injury, the Cavs were outscored by 9.3 points per 100 possessions. And that's just, you obviously have a little bit of like, oh, no, that's not good. And you see him fall to the floor in Toronto and you have concerns like, oh, is this going to be the same issue as last year? Are they going to have to lean on Karis LeVert? Are they going to have to lean on Kevin Love because Wannemacher and Colin Sexton are gone? So who the heck are you going to lean on here? But Donovan Mitchell just put the team on his back like Greg Jennings without a broken leg and just has carried the Cavs considerably and flirted the triple-double against Chicago. Obviously, he said he didn't have the best fourth quarter against Washington, but he was able to do just enough to get the Cavs over the edge and win in overtime. And at the end of the day, a win's a win. That's all that matters. But you could definitely tell, like you said, the guys were tired down the stretch against Washington. And that's my big offensive takeaway. I'm going to stew on the defensive one for a second because I have a bit of an interesting take because I was looking at some advanced stats today. But I want to hear what your offensive takeaway was so far.
Yeah, absolutely. Not to piggyback. I want to play contrarian, but I think Donovan's been so good, it would be disservice to not say Donovan Mitchell. He, one of the things that I really underrated, I think, I watched a couple of the Jazz playoff games last season, and the defensive effort from Donovan leading to the offense, if that makes sense. I think he's averaging 2 steals per game. He's just so long, plays those passing lanes and turns it into offense at times. That piece has really impressed me. And just his decision making, I've lost count in terms of the number of times he's split two defenders and got to the
Mhm.
paint, and then he just hangs in the air. He has enough athleticism to hang in the air and either have do a little floater, little jump shot that he has in the lane, or kick it out to one of the many shooters on this team, Osman, amongst others. So yeah, I've just been severely impressed with Donovan Mitchell. I think we all knew the scoring ability was there. The decision making and playing those passing
Mhm.
lanes has really been impressive to me.
And it's cool because I think you're seeing the Cavs take a couple pages of what worked in Utah when you're like putting the ball in Donovan Mitchell's hands, where like you're running a lot of spread pick and roll. You're looking for, like you said, when Donovan blows past two defenders, or he's able to just get into the paint and either he can score or he has enough foresight and wherewithal to know that, like, hey, I have shooters in Dean Wade or Kevin Love or Jetty Osman or even at times Karis LeVert on the perimeter just operating out there. And like defenders are going to have to collapse on Donovan Mitchell because it's Donovan freaking Mitchell. He's one of the best players at his position. So it'd be remiss of you not to defend him honestly. So like you're going to get some pretty clean looks for those guys floating on the perimeter. And you're seeing Jetty Osman just guns blazing, torching hot. And it's interesting because the Cavs are the top. I know it's 3 games in, so it's a very small sample size, but they are the number one team in terms of 3-point percentage, but they are 22nd or 25th, I believe, last I checked, in terms of 3-point attempts per game. So that's like hyper efficiency on the Cavs' part in terms of 3-point shooting. And I'm a fan of that. I know folks that are more analytically sound are a fan of that. And it's really fun to watch this Cavs team kind of evolve a little bit and adapt to more of a modern play style while keeping their core identity and some of the bones and foundation that got them here.
Yeah, 100% agree with you. I'm sure you and I are going to get into it. Some of the shooting numbers have been so ridiculous that, of course, there's probably going to be some coming back to the norm. But hey, until that happens and until Darius comes back, it's perfect timing for a couple guys to be
Mhm.
hot early on to start the season. And then once you get Darius back, then obviously everything changes from there offensively.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I think the Cavs will regress to the mean eventually. Jetty Osman historically is a peak and valley player, in my opinion, where he'll put together a couple string of good games, and then have a couple bad games just to counterbalance it a little bit. And your goal is obviously to keep him steady and just work on just that aspect of it. But they'll regress back. They're not going to be the number one team. Like teams like Golden State, Boston,
Yeah.
Houston, not the Lakers, in essence, will become more 3-point happy and probably just surpass Cleveland. But it's an interesting offensive wrinkle, and having Donovan Mitchell operate like that, it's a good way to kind of get things going. And I asked Donovan about this after the Wizards game, and I just said, like, do you feel comfortable with Evan Mobley? And Donovan Mitchell talks a lot in his answers, but he said, yeah, I think we're pretty comfortable. But I'm also just kind of figuring out, like, Darius does things a certain way with Evan, so I can do things differently. And I think being multifaceted and a little unpredictable from your two key ball handlers is going to be a fun offensive wrinkle to kind of watch grow and develop as just the season continues to evolve. But so far, like 2 thumbs up from what I'm seeing from the Caps on offense. But I'm still stewing on defense, so I want to hear your defensive takeaways, see if we're thinking the same thing.
Yeah, I don't necessarily have a bunch of numbers to back it up, so I'm gonna shy away from the analytics here for a second. But
You're
I
all
was
good.
so, I was so impressed with what Jared Allen showed the last game versus the Wizards. Of course, Jared does what he always does. He blocks a couple shots per game, but the number of shots he modifies is ridiculous. The piece that I thought was like just groundbreaking is watching Jared Allen guard Bradley Beal on the baseline and guard Kyle Kuzma for moments and have to chase out Porzingis all the way to the 3-point line. Like what Jared Allen
Mhm.
does for this team on defense is just unbelievable. And I know JB said it after one of the games. It's time that people start talking about he's a defensive player of the year type of player. And I just love to hear Jarrett get shine because he's not the flashiest guy. He doesn't talk the most, but just what he was
Mhm.
doing with some of those mobile bigs against the Wizards, I was just loving it on the couch.
Yeah, he's played really well, and I think, like you noted, like he defended Kyle Kuzma well in one possession where he defended Kuzma down to the absolute last second of the shot clock, and Kuzma just made a tough shot over him where it was good D, better O in that situation. But you don't really see a lot of that from Jared Allen. Like last season, you noticed stretchier bigs, whether those like Joel Embiid or Nikola Vucevic is just an example I use a lot because Vucevic really had a propensity to burn Allen because Vuce can just go up to the 3-point line and Allen isn't exactly comfortable going out there and defending in space like that, even though he showed a willingness to do it. And we were thinking in the same vein. It's just Jared Allen's been very impressive on defense. I believe, according to Second Spectrum, he's the sixth best isolation defender in the league so far, with Gary Trent Jr. and OG Anunoby being 1 and 2. But that's pretty impressive because, like you said, he was kind of forced by the Wizards to defend Bradley Beal. Sometimes he was forced to defend Kyle Kuzma in isolation. Sometimes he was forced to defend Kristaps Porzingis one-on-one. Like, there's certain ways teams try to exploit the Cavs using 2 7-footers, but if both of your 7-footers, like, I don't care offensively. Jared Allen doesn't need to shoot 3-pointers. Like, he knows what he is. He's highly efficient as a rim running big man. But if he's comfortable defending in space and in isolation, that's pretty neat because Evan Mobley's also pretty comfortable doing that. And if Isaac Okoro can kind of turn around on offense, he's not so much of a liability. He's also comfortable defending on that. Like, the Cavs can find a little bit of balance here where you're just able to like pick from both sides of the spectrum and just be a balanced team on both ends of the floor where it's just not fun playing them. And Allen's always going to be the linchpin of it. I agree with your sentiment. I agree with JB's sentiment. I think he should be in that defensive player of the year competition and race. I don't think he will at the end of the day just because there's a lot of good defensive players in the league. But if like all defensive honors definitely feel like they're within reach for Allen, and we'll just see what happens because like he showed a lot of multifaceted defensive capabilities against Washington and really did a good job defending Nikola Vucevic too. Like really kept him from gobbling up rebounds because if you watched the Bulls Celtics game from last night, Vucevic, I believe, had 10 offensive rebounds against Boston. Like Jared Allen definitely negated that. And I think that's also a key component too, where the Cavs kind of limit a lot of second chance opportunities by having a big body like Allen who has a nose for grabbing boards.
Yeah. Yeah, totally agree. And even the Raptors game, I didn't see, and maybe I missed it, but I didn't see a ton of crashing on the offensive side. In a lot of plays, I saw Jared Allen around with like 3 or 4 Raptors around him. I mean, of course, he didn't get a ton of rebounds, I think, opening night, but just his scrap and he wasn't getting pushed around. He was just him battling down there like 1-on-3, 1-on-4, and they're just so damn physical. I was just like, oh, shout out to our guy who's just getting absolutely bruised down there and still putting up max effort.
Toronto is an interesting team because they stylistically do play recklessly, I think is a good way to put it, but very physically. Like I think they are a team that likes to deliver a sucker punch a little bit and just kind of throw you off your kilter a little bit. And you saw with the Cavs, yes, they lost. And like you said, Toronto was really banging down low against Jared Allen. You saw Pascal Siakam kind of shredding Karis LeVert down the stretch at times too. But like the Cavs responded well to that adversity. I think that's just kind of like a broad takeaway is Cleveland has been in some interesting positions for the first 3-ish games of the season. We'll see how Wednesday against Orlando goes, of course, but they have responded well to adversity. And this kind of carried from the preseason too, where they really do fight back and claw into the games where you didn't see a lot of that last season, especially when the pressure was really on for them to kind of compete and maintain that lead in the Eastern Conference. They crumbled under it, and maybe this team is hungry. Maybe they are wired a little bit differently, and it's something I'm definitely going to be watching, especially when they head to Boston on Friday and then host the Celtics on November 2nd.
Yep. Yeah, they've got a tough stretch, coming up. I maybe that's just redundant because the East is really good this year, and there's tough stretches all throughout the calendar. But yeah, there's some really interesting games coming up, and maybe that's the next place we go to is one of the guys that they really need for a game against a Boston or a team in that ilk is Darius Garland. It sounds like things are progressing a bit, but I don't know if we've heard too much definitive. Do you have anything from JB or the team in terms of Darius Garland when they might expect him back?
So I don't think there's a hard timeline for him to really be back. I think Donovan Mitchell just being hotter than cooking oil right now is like certainly going to help, the rest and recovery. I think ditto for Ricky Rubio's rest and recovery too. JB did say after practice today on Tuesday that Darius was able to participate on some on-court activities. He didn't really go into details on what, but he just said, he got some sweat in, like he got some work in. I doubt that means contact because he did know that the eye is still pretty swollen. I would imagine it's just a process. I think it's just you have to wait for his body to naturally heal and respond. But I think, like you said, like the game against Boston, that's pretty tricky. Like New York, they're playing pretty well to start the season too. Like that's not going to be an easy out on Sunday for Cleveland. And then you have Boston again on November 2nd, a few days after that. Like those are three pretty challenging games, and Orlando too. Like they have not won a game yet, but they are still loaded with young talent. So like none of these games are like easy wins for the Cavs for sure. But again, with Donovan Mitchell playing so well, it's easy for maybe to not rush Darius back, and then you just kind of figure it out from there. But you'd like to have him back sooner instead of later. But there's no firm update. I know Chris Fedor said that the goal is hopefully Sunday against New York. But if the swelling still like if it's gone down, but it hasn't gone down to enough where he's able to like participate in 5-on-5 or actual contact, you may want to say like, okay, maybe November 2nd against Boston at home. Like, and hey, nice way to make a return is on ESPN, I guess.
Yeah, and this season is such a marathon. You know, the Cavs last year, especially once Rubio went down, you could say, hey, you know, they don't have the talent. They needed to win some of those games to try to avoid the play-in. This year, I think there's a little bit more talent, you know, kind of in the bank. So hey, if Darius needs to sit a few extra games, I think
Yeah.
that's probably a wise move. Um, I guess the next step, because you and I have already shared some really good thoughts, I think, about Donovan Mitchell. Really, we've been really impressed by Donovan Mitchell, and we've talked about Osman. So we were thinking initially we were going to do some Week 1 awards, but I think I know
Hmm.
where both of us are probably at from an MVP and six-man perspective. So
Correct.
maybe we can move. We'll just zoom past that, and we'll talk a little bit about rotations. I was looking up some lineup data, and with Osman just shooting so ridiculously, such a ridiculous high percentage. It's no surprise. It looks like the best offensive lineup thus far has been Donovan Mitchell, LeVert, Osman, Mobley, and Allen, where they're
Hmm.
outscoring opponents by about 23 points for the season. I know you and I talked a little bit about the starting small forward role and the competition between LeVert and Okoro previously. I guess just your initial thoughts, Evan, on how good Osman's played, and is there a chance he's played so well with Garland out that he eats into even more so of some of those Okoro minutes for the next couple games?
I would say so. I think JB Bickerstaff is a coach that likes to play the hot hand and kind of stick with guys that are clicking and firing on all cylinders. And you've noticed Isaac Okoro's minutes have kind of gone down a little bit game by game. Like Toronto was a no show, Chicago was a no show, Washington was again pretty bad. Like Isaac Okoro, it's a bummer because when we were talking about the starting small forward spot, he had a pretty strong end to finish his preseason as well. And we were thinking like, okay, he's going to push Karis LeVert a little bit for the starting spot probably because it just felt like a all but certain that Karis LeVert was locked in as the starting three for the Cavs. But at least I'm glad you didn't ask me if Jetty was going to start for this team because I'm very much of the mindset, hey, you don't want to ask him to do too much. You ask him to be a shooter. You ask him to maybe give you some playmaking, some rebounding every now and then. But like more than anything, you just want him to be a shooter and like you give him some simple tasks and also deploy him in tandem with guards that'll get him the ball easier. Because Jetty does have a propensity to do too much. But yeah, I could see him eating into Okoro's minutes, and I think you already are starting to see it because if Jetty is hot and he keeps giving you 3-pointers, like that's just the nature of the beast in today's NBA. Like you need to hit and take and make threes, and if Isaac Okoro's not doing it, like he can give you all the defense you want, but in turn, if he's not giving you anything on offense, I think you can mask some of Jetty Osman's defensive issues with Mobley and Allen, especially in that successful lineup, like you said that you can just kind of encourage Osman to be guns away from three and just kind of work on it that way. So, yeah, I can see it being a possibility, but who knows? Maybe Isaac Okoro turns things around a little bit too, and then you see him kind of creep back into playing 20-ish, 25-ish minutes a night instead of Osman playing, I believe, 26 minutes per game right now. So we'll see. But yeah, like, how do you feel about it?
Yeah, I think at least me just being the simpleton fan that I am, there was some really nice momentum coming off some of Okoro's best offensive performances we've seen. I think since he's been in the NBA, a couple of those games in the preseason, that beautiful article by Chris Fedor came out about the shooting and all the numbers and all the offseason work he put on. I felt like there was so much momentum.
It was such a kiss of death, man. Like the
Oh,
article came out, the two really strong preseason games. You're like, oh, maybe Okoro is going to turn it around, and then you see him whiff a Euro step against the Raptors, and you're like, uh-oh, and then it just kind of went downhill from there.
you're exactly right. Big uh-oh. And it's just like maybe playing the Raptors and a couple of those possessions early where he kind of got stripped. It's just like what a not a great opponent from a confidence standpoint. Like I would have loved to see maybe the Wizards game or the Bulls game before the Raptors game, but he had a couple of things go wrong offensively. Stepped out of bounds a couple of times in the same game, and it's just like you just can't. He doesn't do enough. He does a lot of good things defensively. He's not racking up the steals and the blocks and
Hmm.
forcing turnovers. He stays in front of his guy and is a little foul happy at times. But yeah, I think to maybe the point you made on Locked On Cavs on today's show, he just you can't get zero from him. You just can't,
Yeah.
because we see that with the Lakers. I mean, you get when your jump shot's not respected by any degree, it's 4-on-5, and that makes it really tough to score in the NBA.
No, I absolutely agree. And to extrapolate a little bit, like I titled that audio and we sent to our producer, like, my apologies to Isaac Okoro's family, house, and dynasty after just kind of tearing him apart a little bit there. But JB Bickerstaff really hammered home the point. I think a lot of it is coach speak. Like, hey, we can't put Isaac Okoro in a box. We have to let him have a little bit of freedom offensively. And maybe you saw more of it during the preseason against like the second stringers and third stringers on the Hawks and the Magic. But the Cavs are in a different situation. And I've kind of felt this way since last season, where you saw Okoro show a lot of his limitations because the Cavs really accelerated things after they got Evan Mobley. And it's tough because you want to see Isaac perform. I think he has the ability to perform. I think defensively he could be the best perimeter defender on this team, if not already he is. But it's just teams aren't going to respect you or be honest defending you. You're going to see guys sag off of you, and it's just going to create a lot of frustration and liabilities. And I stressed this during the offseason. Even if he became a semi below average shooter and he's giving you 8 to 10 points a night and really solid defense and maybe a couple assists, like that's a home run for Isaac Okoro. But like right now, it's a mess. He's averaging a point or less than a point on like 20% shooting this season, and he hasn't hit a single 3-pointer. And it's just tough. It was like you said, like everything felt great with after the Fedor article. It was like a really great feature on him. And then there's the two preseason games, and you're like, okay, maybe Isaac Okoro can turn the page a little bit. Maybe he's no longer just a guy. And he did have unprecedented circumstances, but it's frustrating. And like the circle back to like our initial outline, like needs improvement. That's the guy that needs improvement. I just don't know how Cleveland can find it when there's guys that are playing better in front of him right now that probably deserve more of his minutes.
Yeah, and Dean Wade to me is one of those guys. Understood, he's not as laterally as quick as Isaac Okoro is, but just the gravity that Dean Wade brings on behind the 3-point arc. And yeah, if I look at Okoro's quick stats, opening night, 12 minutes, 0 for 1 from the field against the Chicago Bulls, 27 minutes, 1 for 5 against the Wizards, 20 minutes, 1 for 4, and he attempted a couple of threes in each game, but obviously didn't hit any. And there's just he's not the kind of guy that's going to grab a bunch of rebounds or have assists or even has steals. He has 1 steal for the year. So it's
Yeah,
just,
it's tough, man. It's
yeah,
tough. Like I don't you
yeah,
throw up your hands and say he is pretty much the same player he was last season right now, and that's a little concerning because you expect some type of leap in year
yeah,
3.
yeah. On the flip side of the competition for the starting small forward role, Karis LeVert, I've seen a lot of interesting stuff about Karis LeVert. There's some really good, I think, so far this year. There's some not so good. Do you have any thoughts on how you think LeVert's playing? It's tough because he hasn't had a chance to play with Darius and Donovan really throughout these first 3 games. But how do you
Mhm.
think LeVert's played both on the offensive and defensive side thus far?
I don't think he's been like great defensively. So the game against Toronto, not stellar. Obviously, the game against Chicago, he was better. He did a good job containing or helping contain DeMar DeRozan, and Zach LaVine just went off because he had fresh legs that night. And then against Washington, he had a few good possessions against Brad Beal. Like it's Karis LeVert. When people think he could be the ball stopper he was in Brooklyn, I don't think you're going to get that anymore because physically you just can't because of injuries and everything else he's dealt with. But on the inverse, offensively, I think he's played well. I'm pleasantly surprised and pleasantly glad to say I'm wrong about his fit with this system where he is becoming more comfortable, and he said several times he's still adjusting to kind of just truly playing off ball next to Donovan and Darius, but it's a little bit of that, and then he'll be deployed in lineups of just Darius or just Donovan, and then he'll get his number called every now and then to score in isolation or be that secondary creator and everything else. But it's not seamless yet. My co-host on Locked On Cavs, Chris Manning, has really noted a few times, like defensively, there are going to be some quiet concerns about Mitchell, Garland, and LeVert sharing the floor together, especially in crunch time situations. But we'll cross that bridge when we come to it, obviously. But for now, it's been not terrible offensively. I think more than anything with Isaac Okoro just being so bad, like LeVert doesn't really have any serious competition for the starting three spot right now.
Right.
And more than anything, he's been giving you enough offensively. And again, it's kind of similar to the Jetty Osman aspect with that lineup with Okoro, or with Mitchell, Mobley, and Allen. Like you can have a bit of a defensive cover with Mobley and Allen, and then Donovan Mitchell at least trying on defense that you can maybe mask some of the deficiencies LeVert has.
Yeah, I think it was last game against the Wizards. Levert's, I think, done a decent job of kind of getting to his spot when he's dribbling in. He's gotten to the rack a couple times, and I need to go back and I'll go back and look it up in terms of his finishing at the rim. But he's had like 3 or 4 bunnies where he's getting contested. But I'd say 85% of the time, an NBA player, gets the ball in the cup from there, and he's had a hard time with some of those bunnies where he's going up. So that's something I'll dig into. But I think he's had some tough luck. Yeah, to your point earlier, I mean, he's making his threes. He's missing all of his twos. He's missing all of his twos. So we're probably going to see
Which is
that come
odd
back
for
in.
him as a player because you expect him to miss more threes than twos.
Exactly. Yep. And he historically, obviously, he hasn't been a great 3-point shooter. So it's been very interesting going on the LeVert ride. And the one thing, and this is just me being a little grumpy about stylistically. I don't love. I think there were 2 possessions last game against the Wizards where I think it was Donovan, dribbled in, uh, defense collapsed. It was like swing to Karras on, I think, the left hand side, and instead of like one more like instead of the hockey assist or one more swing to a shooter, he went into his dribble drive thing, and it's not like my preferred style of basketball, but he has been a great connector so far, and he's averaging a fair amount of assists thus far. So I think I need to probably deal with it until Darius Garland comes back, and then we'll see what the offense looks like with those 3.
No, you're allowed to be grumpy about that. You're absolutely are. And I think I understand the sentiment with it too, where it's frustrating because you want it to be more of a proper fit at this point. But
Mm-hmm.
I think also just I'll give the grain of salt where Karis LeVert's still kind of learning how to adapt to being like a guy who predominantly plays off ball. And like Darius Garland said, to me, he can be lethal, air quotes, in the spread pick and roll offense the Cavs kind of run at times. And I think you're seeing it with the 3-point attempts and not a lot of mid range shots. But I don't know. I think it'll balance out. Then the Cavs will figure it out. I think JB will need to kind of wait. And he's a pragmatic coach in terms of his approach when it comes to like his lineups and planning. So he's not going to make like a drastic change 3 games in, but like 5 to 10 games. What's working, what's not working. Like Evan Mobley averaging less than double-digit shot attempts is a little concerning to me still, but like they have to
Mm-hmm.
fix that. And I think maybe getting LeVert some cleaner looks in the mid-range where he's truly comfortable, and Bickerstaff isn't a coach that discourages mid-range shots, is like the next step for them to an extent at times. Like it's interesting to see, but I think like you said, like him going into that dribble, like trying to attack the basket, like I think that's just him trying to break his old habits, but sometimes leans into them just in the just the heat of the moment.
Yep. I'm glad you brought up Evan Mobley, and not that we need to dive too far into this, but I very much have been thinking exactly what you just stated about his lack of attempts, and specifically the Chicago Bulls game. I was just watching him. It may have been because I had the over in points 15.5. He cashed it at 16. Thank you very much, Evan Mobley. But but he was guarded primarily by Patrick Williams, but they were constantly getting him switched on to other guys like Levine and DeRozan. And I didn't see an emphasis to get him the ball once he had one of those two guys on him, Levine or DeRozan. It was just a little curious to me why they weren't force feeding it. Obviously, Donovan had a great game, so other guys were doing it. But I just thought without Darius, Mobley would kind of take that step up with just the touches. I'm not even saying making the shots, but just the attempts. So that part was a little surprising to me.
Yeah, it's surprising to me too. I wonder if part of it is he doesn't have that luxury of having a proper preseason with these guys in the camp because he's dealing with the ankle injury, and he's still learning on the fly how to play with Donovan Mitchell. And I was talking to Chris Manning about this for Wednesday's episode of Locked On Cavs. I think just that's the issue with not having Darius Garland is you don't have a guard out there who is truly comfortable like getting Evan Mobley the ball in spots he likes and just certain attempts and everything. And the other issue is, and it's not really an issue, but it's just how he's wired as a player. Mobley is also the guy who would rather look for a pass than a shot attempt because he thinks it's going to lead to more of a successful play. Where I noticed it a little bit against Washington. Like I did notice what you said about in the Chicago game, but against Washington, where Jared Allen is in the low block and he had his hands up and Mobley throws it to him, and the defense collapses on Allen. He throws it right back to Mobley, and then the defense resets and starts to defend Mobley again. Mobley passes it right back to Jared Allen, and I'm just like, man, you could have taken that jump shot because your shot is looking a lot better this season. But I think maybe it's just a little bit of tentativeness, and he just wants to make sure he's leading the winning plays where they'll figure it out. I think JB just being honest and saying, hey, that's on me more than anything. I need to get him better looks, especially at the rim or in terms of 3-point shots, because JB really wants to unlock and empower Evan offensively at times because defensively there's no concern because he's just such a cerebral player on that end of the floor that you just got to come up with creative ways. And I just also do think part of it is the Cavs are just kind of saying like, you know what, Donovan, just go do what makes you successful in Utah. Like we're going to run spread pick and roll. We're going to have shooters on the perimeter. We're going to have a big man who can roll to the basket. We're going to get you as many clean looks as possible because he's averaging like 20 plus shot attempts with Darius Garland out. And that's also part of it too, is like, there's only so many opportunities. And I think Donovan Mitchell's just going to soak a lot of those up while he's just kind of the primary initiator for 40 plus minutes a night.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with you. The one really encouraging thing to me about Evan Mobley so far, even though the attempts haven't quite been where I expected them to be, is his free throw shooting. He's 11 of 12 so far with on his free throws this season, and he started off his rookie year pretty hot on free throws, and then he really cratered down the stretch. I think he dropped all the way to the high 60 percentile. Yeah. So great to see him 11 of 12 so far. I think he's 1 of 3 from 3, which all 3 of those attempts came against the Raptors opening night, and then 11 of 12 from the free throw line. So just him getting those free throws down, if, obviously he's not going to stay at 91, but, if he can stay around that 75 to 80%, that would be a vast improvement for him, which would be great.
Yeah, it would be. And I have the same concerns as you. With Mobley kind of cratering as a free throw shooter, I'm like, maybe the shooting mechanics thing, like maybe that's not going to be something that instantly translates, because there is something you can kind of take hand in hand with. Like, if a guy's a good free throw shooter, there's a capability for him to become like a good jump shooter, and especially a 3-point shooter. But he really hyped it up during the preseason, and Evan Mobley is not one to really mince words because he seldom speaks. So I would want to give him the benefit of the doubt. I'd like to see him attempt more 3-pointers if the Cavs are going to try and advocate that a little bit. I think he's shooting 33% on 1 attempt per game right now. So again, it's a 3-game sample size. It's not huge, but that's just kind of like a bit of like a little red flag that shot up, because my friend Danny Cunningham pointed out to me like, yeah, he's averaging less than 10 attempts per game. And I'm like, you kind of don't want that from a guy that's probably going to be your best player the next 2 or 3 years.
Yep. Yeah, totally agree. And without Darius, you'd think he would be stepping up. But I think you made the best point earlier on, which was he was sprained ankle. He was out essentially 2 whole weeks. So once we revisit maybe over the next 3 or 4 games, if that doesn't go up at that point, then it'll be maybe an interesting topic to dissect a little bit to see who's getting the touches and why it's not Mobley. Well, Evan, do you want to get out of here with a couple of trivia questions?
Sure, let's do it. Hopefully I do better than I usually do in trivia scenarios.
Yeah, no pressure or anything. It is Tuesday trivia. So I got two for you here. I'll
Cool.
hit them to you kind of quick. You may know them. It's you can tell we definitely didn't prep this because I may just throw you a softball here. I'm not sure. But I'm gonna go. The first question I'm gonna go with team stats. So the
Okay.
Cavaliers have excelled with a couple of team stats this year. And Evan, first question to you will be, um, where do the Cavaliers currently rank higher in terms of full team shooting percentage? Is it their field goal percentage or their free throw percentage? So which do they rank higher, field goal percentage or free throw percentage?
I was hoping you would say 3-point percentage because I'd say that much more confidently. Um, I want to say field goal percentage just because Jared Allen's a cheat code right now.
Yep. So they're both ridiculous. It's actually free throw percentage. So
Oh wow.
their Cavs are first in free throw percentage, 86.4% from the free throw line. Donovan Mitchell and Evan Mobley have really helped out that number. And they're third in the league in terms of field goal percentage at
Hmm.
49.2. So just ridiculous free throw shooting so far from the boys.
An offensive juggernaut known as the Cleveland Cavaliers, something we all expected heading into this season.
That's right. All right, we'll get you out of here on this one. So last trivia
Okay.
question for you here. Um, PER, player efficiency rating. So for folks
Uh-huh.
that don't know what this is, I'll rattle it off real quick. PER essentially takes into account all the good things and the bad things that you do on the court. So a good thing could be made field goals, made free throws, made 3-pointers, assists, rebounds, blocks, steals, all the good stuff. And then it takes into account negative stuff like missing shots, turnovers, personal fouls. It takes all that into account. So typically your PER, player efficiency rating leaders, are guys like Giannis and Joker, guys who just do a bunch of stuff really well. So the
Mm-hmm.
Cavaliers have two guys in the top 30 in player efficiency rating. One of those is Donovan Mitchell. And the second guy, I have to give you a little bit of a clue because this one's kind of tough. So we're going to ask who the second player in the top 30 is in player efficiency rating. I am going to call out for you, though, it is a bench player. So no one else in the starting lineup is in the top 30. The second person in the top 30 on the Cavs is in the top 30 player efficiency rating. Who would that second player be?
I don't think it's Dean Wade. I don't. It's definitely not Isaac Okoro. I can say that with a lot of confidence right now. So it's either Jetty Osman or Robin Lopez because I don't think Hollow Neto qualifies for PER right now because he hasn't played enough. But and the Donovan Mitchell aspect doesn't surprise me because he's just playing out of his gourd right now. But I'm gonna go on a limb. Robin Lopez.
Unbelievable, ladies and gentlemen. Robin Lopez is correct. Robin Lopez, 26.46 PER. I think he clocked in around 26 in the league. Osman was 18.32. So I think he was top 50. But nicely done. I thought I was really going to stump you there. I didn't know if you were going to be able to pull Rolo out of the lineup. That was very impressive, Evan.
I can't pull him out of the lineup after that circus shot he made. My brain melted for a split second when I saw that happen. I was just like, what the heck? And my favorite part about that though is when you ask anyone about it, they're like, of all guys to happen to, it makes the most sense that it was Robin Lopez. Like the guy who looks the most like he looks like he'd be the most least coordinated person ever. Like just somehow makes the craziest shot.
Falling on his ass, about to get the 3-second call, flips it over his head, and boom, there we go. 2 points. And they needed it. They needed
They
it.
did. It could have been the difference. It probably was the difference maker making overtime or not. That's the butterfly effect. Is if Robin Lopez does or doesn't make the shot.
That's right. Well, Evan, very impressive, man. 1 out of 2. You got the tougher question right, correct, in my opinion. So very nicely done. If we continue this segment, I'll keep track and we'll do this professionally. So I'll make sure that
Okay.
we'll keep player efficiency ratings on your answered questions. So we'll get this going here. Um,
Sounds
well,
great.
well, to close, Evan, any last nuggets, any last thoughts before we wrap up?
Um, hmm. I don't know. It's just check out Locked On Cavs. We've been grinding a lot. Check out Fear the Sword. We've been grinding over there too. There's a lot of great writers that are just hungry to talk with this team and just watch this team however you can. They're fun. Like folks, if you aren't checking out the Cleveland Cavaliers, they are a breath of fresh air, especially after watching the Browns every Sunday.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you're going from just one of the more frustrating teams. A bunch of guys on our website talk about it, podcast about it. One of the more frustrating teams to a team that's young, fun, and battles their asses off. And it's truly a well-run organization where there's buy-in and good culture. And can't say the same for other teams in this city. So please keep listening to us here. We'll aim to be back next week. Follow us here at WFNY Cleveland. I'm at Seth Hoops. He's at Am Not Evan. Please read him. Write down Euclid. Listen to him. Locked On Cavs. Have a great night, everyone. Thanks for listening.